Good morning. This is Crystal Woods with Seasons in the Vine, and it's Fresh Friday. And I want to talk today about seasons of waiting. Waiting is one of, I think, the most difficult things we can walk through when we desire to have something happen and there is no way to speed things up. You're just having to wait. And the challenge is, what kind of fruit can we produce in the waiting? I mean, that's really, really what it's about. And so I'm going to start us off with a little quote by Elizabeth Elliot, who's fantastic, was a fantastic woman of the faith. I realized that the deepest spiritual lessons are not learned by his letting us have our way in the end, but by his making us wait, bearing with us in love and patience until we are able to honestly pray what he taught his disciples to pray. Thy will be done. Thy will be done. How do we get from a place of where we know where we want to go or we know what needs to happen, but there's going to be a time period of waiting? And how do we get ourselves into a position of being able to confidently pray, thy will be done? A lot of this is rooted in trust. I'm going to talk about a couple things, but definitely as we continue to walk with the Lord, and I've talked before about the legacy and being able to point to areas and situations in our life that we know he orchestrated, he was there, he definitely took control of, all of those different things. We're able to then lean back more into trusting that God ultimately knows exactly what he's doing. And so trust is a wonderful thing that you can definitely focus on growing as you are in a season of waiting. And one way that I would recommend growing your trust, I mean, you have to risk to have trust, right? Like, if you want to grow in your ability to trust, then you also need to grow in your ability to risk, because in the risk is when you see God arrive. If you're always hanging out on the sidewalk and never attempting to cross the road, well, how can you grow any trust at all? Because you're not even letting yourself see him on the other side of the road, knowing that he will meet you there. And so you have to figure out ways to risk and to really put yourself out there. And these are difficult things. We all walk through seasons of waiting, and it is very challenging. So you definitely want to focus on growing your trust. Another way to really look at that is to view examples in the Bible of waiting, people that had to wait. There was a time of knowing what was coming, knowing of the promise, but not being at the fulfillment of the promise yet. And I mean, you see it all throughout Scripture. This is foundational to a Christian walk. This is foundational to the growth of a Christian walk, is knowing how to produce fruit, knowing how to grow trust, to keep your hope up in seasons of waiting. And definitely looking at examples of different people in the Bible will help you grow your trust and have that map of saying, the Israelites had to wait, 40 years in the wilderness, or let's back up to Moses. You know what I mean? He's gone in the land of Midian for a very long time before he's even called back to Egypt. And in exile, the nation of Israel is taken, and they're going to be in exile for 70 years. And so the promise is coming of deliverance, but it's not here yet. And we want to rail against so much when we're in the waiting, and we want to fight, and we want to make things happen, and we want to take control. And that is the wrong way to do it. We must surrender ourselves completely to the timing of God in trust that he is doing exactly what needs to be done, and there will be release and there will be fulfillment of promise at the exact right time. And in the meanwhile, we can be growing our trust in Him, how to have hope, how to maintain hope, even though solutions seem far away, and how to grow fruit. And so the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Boy, those are really hard to exhibit when we're so frustrated in a season of waiting. And that's the goal, though. How can I maintain my joy when my everyday is so radically different than what I desire it to be, or what I think even God desires it to be? And yet here I am in this position of waiting. How do I have joy? Where does that come from? And it's going to be different for you. It's different for me. And that's really where your relationship with the Lord has to grow and be nurtured so that you can hear from Him and get those daily implants of grace that you need to continue to wait, and wait in a way that really brings God glory and love. Like, sometimes if you're waiting and you're getting tense and frustrated, you can be a little short on the love aspect, the love fruit for sure, and just kind of tense and pulled back and maybe short with people. There's just not a lot of elasticity with your capacity and what you're able to handle, because you're just so consumed by this waiting time. And so I recommend really and truly, and this is from a person who understands what it is to wait. And I don't know what it is to wait in your situation, but I do know what it is to wait in my situations. And there's been years of wait, 20 years in some cases, 7 years in another situation in my life, 3 years in another situation in my life, 2 years in another. Our lives are full of these areas of tension and having to wait and knowing where you want to go or what you want to happen, but that's just not going to be tomorrow. It's not going to be tomorrow. And so devote yourselves to studying the Word, studying the scriptures of other people in history and their waiting. Look how long even the nation of Israel and the world itself waits for the Messiah. There's something in the waiting. And in that, can we get to a place where we say, Thy will be done? I'm going to share with you just a little bit. I'm continuing to move through some really beautiful restoration in my own life. And in one area, there is a continued restoration in worship. And at times, there have been people that have asked, like, well, how long do you think you'll still be waiting? Or are you frustrated about the waiting? Or how do you stay hopeful in that? And I can truly say that through that particular situation that I walked through, the hand of God became so real to me, and His nature and His love for me and what I saw Him healing and working in my life, that the trust grew to a point where I was able to say, I don't want it a minute before He releases it to me. I'm not going to fight for it. I'm not going to ask for it. I'm going to be obedient to what He tells me to do today. I'm going to be obedient to what He tells me to work on today and tomorrow and next week and next month. And I'm going to do that work. And I am fully confident that He will be who He says He is, because He is faithful. That became the foundation of my life, is the faithfulness of God, especially in this area, that I could say with full confidence, I don't want it a second before He releases it to me. I don't want it at the wrong time, and I'm not going to force it. And I'm going to let Him be God, and I'm going to be His servant, and I'm going to listen to His voice and do what He desires me to do in the time of waiting. And whenever it happens, it happens. Now, that's an area in my life that I have really surrendered to the Lord. Part of my ministry and worship, I've surrendered that. Another part of my life, I still struggle in. Even this week, there is just this relationship that I just get so frustrated in. And I lose sight of the character of God, the nature of God, his goodness and his faithfulness in that area. And so I can be hugely successful and victorious in a season of waiting in certain areas because I remember who God is in them, and I can trust fully. And then in this other area, the struggle is real. And so I'm speaking from a place full of transparency of how very difficult it is to wait, especially waiting without being frustrated and disappointed and depressed and down, but waiting with hope, waiting with joy in my life, waiting with love and patience and kindness and gentleness, and maintaining my self-control, even though I feel like I'm hitting a wall over and over and over again in the waiting. And so I want to encourage you today, as I will be encouraging myself. I'm going deep with this. I don't know if I have to write it all over my whole house. If I have to see it every minute of the day, I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to do whatever he tells me to do. Way back in the day, when I was in a place of needing to see the promises of God over and over again, I wrote them out, and I would read them out loud to myself. The truth about God, the promises about God, 3 to 4 times a day in order to keep hope alive. But I'm going to do whatever it takes in this other area of my life because I want to have the same victory and the same peace and the same joy that I have experienced in my continued restoration and worship and in that part of ministry for me, I want to have that in my relationship and in what I'm still dreaming and believing will be the future, but we're not there yet. And how do I do that well? And how do I produce that fruit? And so I'm going deep, and I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna put it wherever I need to see it, and I'm gonna study the history of people of God who have had to wait, and how do you do that well? And I'll keep you up to date on that because it's going to be an ongoing thing. So I just want to fill you with courage today. I believe absolutely that we can get to a point in our waiting where we are producing beautiful fruit and we're becoming like Jesus, and we are full of hope and love and joy and peace in our life. And we can say, thy will be done, Lord. And what I desire, I don't want if it is not in your time. I don't even want what you don't desire for me. Just keep it away from me and teach me how to be obedient to what you've designed. And so be encouraged and challenged today to look at the areas in your life that you're waiting and how can we become conquerors in them, because it is possible. I've seen it in my own life, and I know I will see it in other areas of my life as life goes on, as time goes on, and things continue to move. So be blessed, and I will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. If this was speaking to you, let me know. I'm just talking to a screen right now, but I'm believing that God is doing what he does, and I'm just putting it out there, and just whatever he wants to do, I'm coming into agreement with. And so I pray that you were blessed by this message and that you are encouraged to walk out your seasons of waiting, knowing that you can produce beautiful fruit, and it's really fruit that you can only produce in the waiting. Because if you got it, the fruit would be different if you didn't have to wait. If it was immediate, the fruit is sweeter when we submit fully to what God is trying to work in us in the waiting. And so I will see you next Friday. Hope you guys are well.